Hello everyone. In in this video, we're going to have a go at creating a really basic weather dashboard. It's going to take a location postcode, which is then going to be entered, and then once that is entered, it is going to submit, and it's going to give you the weather location. So it's going to convert the postcode to a location. It will give you it in degrees. It will tell you what the kind of coverage is like, and it feels like degrees. And we'll also have a look at how you can add more information in, how you can add some CSS formatting, and some HTML code, as well as how you can use Python Anywhere to freely host a live version of your web app, which makes it all the better. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over to PyCharm, and we are going to create a new project. So call it something sensible. I'm calling mine Flask Weather App because we're using the Flask framework to develop it. Okay. Obviously, I'm doing a virtual environment here. I keep this ticked on just because it creates a welcome script. That's fine for me. I don't need it necessarily to or not. So I'm going to click on create in this window. It's just setting that all up for me. And then we'll just go through how you actually import Flask, and how you create it. So I'm just going to quickly change the font size on this one. So the first thing we're going to do before we actually get Flask working is we need to just make sure that we've got the Flask framework installed on our computer. So you can use a number of ways to do this. Thankfully, JetBrains and PyCharm has their own inbuilt Python interpreter settings. So all I'm going to do, so I'm going to go through those steps again, is go to File, Settings, and I'm going to scroll down until I get to this area here, which is my project. So yours will say whatever your project name is, and I'm just going to click on Python Interpreter. Now here you get all of the packages that are currently installed. So you see here I've got pip installed, setup tools, and wheel. I'm going to click on this little plus here, and I can search for the name of the framework I want. So in this case I want Flask. So I'm going to pop Flask in there, click on install package, and wait for that to install. Brilliant. So you see here it's told me that that's installed. That's all I need for now. And you'll see here that it's also added a lot of other things in there. So that adds some other packages that go along with it. Predominantly being Ginger 2, which is used to when we add our HTML code later on. Okay, so I'm going to click on OK. And I'm just going to Control A and just delete all of the code that's in there. So in order to get our application working, the first thing we need to do is just import Flask and its framework. And the format for that is we're going to do from Flask, and that's going to be all lowercase for the F for that one. We're going to import, and then for capital F, this one, Flask. Okay, so that's us setting that up. So the next thing we actually need to do is to declare an app, or our web application is going to be. So commonly that will be just known with the variable app. And what we're going to do is we're going to say equals Flask, and then we're going to open brackets, underscore underscore name underscore underscore. Now, I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of the name and main thing, which we're going to come to later. But what I am going to do is, in this video, I'm going to link to another video that really explains well how and why this works and why we use it in our code. Okay, so instead of me diving into details, but that's what we're going to do for now. And then watch that video because it really does explain very well why we do the name equals main on here. All right, so we've now got a blank application set up. So app equals Flask name. So the next thing we want to do is we obviously need to start telling it what to do on the various areas of our site. So you can think of this as like a website. So what do you want it to do on the home page? What do you want it to do on, if you had a contact us page or an about us page? So essentially we're building up this application, all the various areas of it. And we do that using part of Flask, which is called routing. So we route the different areas off. And I'll show you how the syntax of this works. It's a little bit different to most other things in Python. We're going to use the @ symbol, and then we're going to put in the name of our app, which we've called app handily, and we're going to do dot root. And then what we're going to do is we're going to open our brackets. We're going to put a slash in there, either side of a quote, as if we were doing a string. So essentially you can think of this as the root of your application, or the very first thing that gets seen, almost like a home page on a website. Okay, so what that's saying is this is what's going to happen when we get to the home page. Now what this might be is it might be some HTML, it could be a procedure to run, it could be a number of things. But to get this started, first of all, I'm just going to show you really quickly a way where we can just get it to understand some simple HTML. So by default, anything we write in here, Flask will be able to interpret HTML. So if you write HTML code in here, you'll absolutely be able to run it fine. But obviously, if you've got a huge application, trying to run lots and lots of HTML code within this one file is going to get really tricky to read. So what we'll do is we'll set up a basic app where it's just got a home page and then a second page, and then we'll go through how you can then link it to HTML files and CSS files where you can start adding some styling. Alright, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to create a definition. I'm going to define a function here, which I am going to call weather home. Okay, and I'm not going to have any parameters for that at the moment, so it's just going to be called with nothing in it. And all I'm going to do at the moment is I'm just going to return. And this is where I'm going to type sort of just like standard HTML code into it. So I'm going to do header 1, and I'm going to say welcome to the weather app. Oh, how you spell weather. Okay, like so. And then to get this to actually work, this is, again, I'm going to link to that video again up in the corner in a second. This is where we are going to do a check. So if name equals main is essentially checking that the Python code we have here is runnable, is a script that can be run. Okay, there's lots more behind it, and I will do a terrible job of explaining it, hence why I'm going to link to this video here, which explains what it does, why it's important to include it in our code. But we're going to do this comparison here. So if __ name __ equals, and then we're going to do __ main __, then we want the app to run. Okay, and that is what will get our application to run. So if name equals main, which it should do, when we run this, it should come out that that is true. So name will equal main, then it will run. Okay, so let's try running this now. And you'll see here when we run it, we get this warning. This is a development server. Do not use it in a production deployment. So the reason is this is local. So I can run it on this machine and it will work fine. But if I want to start sharing this with other people, it's not going to work. And that's where I'd need it on a production server, which is where Python Anywhere comes in, which we're going to use a little bit later. So let's click on this link. And you'll see here that I've now got welcome to the weather app, which is an excellent start, but it's not quite what we need. So what we're going to do next is we're just going to have a go at styling some of the pages, adding in a form and an interface to use, and I'm just going to show you how to do that next. Okay, so back into our PyCharm weather app. First thing I'm going to do is just stop this running because it's still running at the top here. And one thing to check, if you have got multiple Python files open or you've been working on something previously and this hasn't worked, one thing just to double check, particularly if you're using PyCharm, is just to make sure this either says current file or matches the Python file that you have here, because it has a habit sometimes of running another file and you don't even realize it's happening. So just make sure that says either current file or the matches the Python name on here. Okay, so in order to get our HTML codes to work, we're going to have to set up a templates folder in our root directory for our project, okay? And that's going to hold all of the templates for the HTML code, and eventually it will hold the style sheets for the CSS as well. So in order to do that, all I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this Flask weather app root thing here, and I'm going to click on new directory. I'm going to call that templates. And you'll see here that it's positioned itself just underneath here as a folder. Okay, and then inside there, I'm going to put my very first HTML file. So I'm going to do new HTML file. And if you haven't got HTML file as an option there, you can just click on file and put .html on the end to tell it to be a HTML file. And I'm going to call that home.html. And you'll see here that it is automatically created a empty HTML file with a nice title on here. So I'm going to change this title first of all to be the weather dashboard. So as you know from doing your HTML before, all of the content to do with the styling and any sort of meta information will go in the head section, and then all of the content goes into the body section. So I'm just going to really quickly now set up a header one, which is going to say weather dashboard. Oh, I just clicked on there. There we go, let's try that again. Weather dashboard in Flask. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to create a really basic form on here, okay? So what we're going to do to get that to work is I'm going to create, oh, got my thing in the form. I'm going to create a form. So that's just done by creating a form function there. And my form is just going to have a location postcode to enter. And it's going to have a submit button on it, okay? So location postcode. And that is going to be the input. And the type is going to be text, because I want it to be a free text box for them to type into. And then the name is going to equal postcode. So that's like an identifier that I can use to in my Python file later on. Okay, and I'll end that one there. Then I'm going to add a break line here. So a break line just forces a new line. So I put break here. I'm going to do another input. This time I want the type to equal submit, which will be a submit button. And the value is going to equal submit, because obviously I wanted to say submit, like so. And that's all it is to it. So I've got welcome, weather dashboard in Flask. I've got this location postcode. So I've declared a form here. I've got a location postcode, which is going to be a text field, and the name is going to be postcode. And then I'm going to have an input of a button, so a submit button, which value is going to be submit. So now I need to associate this HTML file with this Python file. Okay, so it's going to involve changing this bit of text here. And to do that, we need to add, import another set of methods in here. So we need something called render request, okay? So I'm going to do, we're going to need another set of methods to do that. So we need something called render template. So I'm going to comma here and render, and you can see here you've got render template here. So what this does is it kind of acts as a middleman between our HTML and our Python code here to get our Flask to work. And what that means I can do is, in place of this return thing here, I can tweak it slightly to point to that HTML file I've got. So it must match this file, and it must make sure it's in this directory here. Okay, so I'm going to take away this code I've got now, and I'm going to go render template, and then inside those brackets, using quotes, I'm going to put home.html. Okay, so let's have a look, see what that looks like now when I run it. So I'm going to click on here, and you'll see here now I've got weather dashboard in Flask, I've got location postcode, I've got my text field, yeah, and I've got my submit button. But obviously at the moment nothing happens. Okay, you can see it stored the value, because when I put it in here, it stored it up there. Okay, there's no validation, there's no verification, but it is going to take that form. So what we need to do now is we're going to start delving into the API. Okay, now the API is where we're going to use the open weather data to start pulling back information based on the value that I enter in here. So what it's going to do is it's going to store the value I have here. It's going to use that to look up what the postcode is, and it's going to display that weather information back to me. And that's what we're going to have a look at next. So now that we've got our basic interface working and we've got a page, we want to start actually using something with that data and getting some information on the weather. So you've previously created an account on Open Weather Map, and Open Weather Map is a community that holds lots of data about the weather, as you can see here, in various different formats, and you can get access to that data using API keys that you get given when you sign up. So the first thing you're going to do once you're logged in is go to API, and you'll see that there are various different data collections on the weather. There's a 16-day forecast, the hourly forecast for 4 days, 30 days climate. There's all sorts of different things in here, okay? There's history stuff if you want to have a look at that. We are just going to be looking at the current weather data, okay? So that's the current weather where we are now. And I'm going to click on this API doc here. And what we're going to do is we want to scroll down to do an API request by zip code. Now, we're obviously in the UK, so we don't use zip codes here. So we're going to just put in postcodes instead, okay? But we're still going to use the same format. Now, this here tells you about the parameters that you can pass on to this URL, okay? So we have to, by default, include a zip code. Okay, we have to include a country code and we have to include our API key. And together, this builds our unique URL or web address that will give us the weather data. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to copy this code, fill in the gaps here to show you how it's going to work. Now, obviously, when we do this for real, our Python code is going to do this behind the scenes. We won't have to manually do this, but just to show you how this URL will be unique and made just for you, okay? So I'm going to open a new tab in here and I'm going to paste it as it is. So the first thing I need to replace in here is a zip code. Now, obviously, we don't have zip codes, we have postcodes. Now, the only small hurdle we have here is that HTML doesn't like spaces. And it doesn't like the postcode without the gap in between. So, for example, if I was ME13QN, if I put a space in there, it wouldn't work. And likewise, if I didn't put a space in there, it still wouldn't work. So what we need to do is we need to put a code in there that HTML will interpret as a gap. So I'll show you what I mean here. So if I do TN23, and I'd usually put a space in here now, but that won't work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do %20, which will... HTML will say that's a space, okay, so it won't put %20 in there, and I'm going to put 1NN in the end, which is the end of the postcode. Now, country code for us is GB because we are in Great Britain, so I'm just going to put a GB in here, and then this API key here, this will be unique to all of you, okay. So all I'm going to do is go to my email, which has got my API key on there. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste that in here. Now, when I enter on this, you can tell that this is valid. It has pulled out the data for this postcode here, TN23-1NN, okay? And this is all of the data that I can use now in my callback. So I could put in, if I wanted to, the coordinates of that location. I can say that the weather is clear. I can say what the temperature is. Now, by default, this is in Kelvin, but we can change the units when we do the code later on to bring it back in either Fahrenheit or Celsius. Celsius is typically used. Or, if you're feeling fancy, you could do a calculation to convert it from Kelvin into degrees centigrade. You've got feels like, the minimum and maximum temperature, the air pressure and humidity, so this could be useful for your dashboard later. You've got the visibility, wind speed, the gusts, all of this information you'll be able to use in your code as we go through. But the first thing you want to do is, I've manually done this by hand, is we want to take this and pop it into our Python code. So I'm going to go slightly off piste here and show you how we're going to build this. So let me show you what I'm going to do. The first thing I'm going to do is just create a new function underneath here, and I'm going to call it get weather, okay? And the things I'm going to pass on to that will be a postcode and an API key. They're matching the two things that we had on here. So the postcode or zip code and the API key. The country code, we're going to hard code in as GB. Okay. Now, I appreciate if we were doing this on a larger scale, that will limit the use of this to only GB. But that's what we're just going to do for now for ease. Okay. There are obviously ways you could tweak that to put in or pick up a country code, etc. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to first of all get a URL from this. So what I basically want it to do is to bring back that URL which will tell us that data that we just got earlier. So I'm going to create a new variable called API URL. I keep doing this today, don't I? API URL, and that is going to be equal to, and I'm going to put that address in there. So at the moment it matches exactly the same as what I put into that web page. But obviously I want to replace these values with the postcode and with the API key, and we're going to hard code this country code in here. So I'm going to use some string formatting to do this. So by that I mean I'm going to leave these curly braces in here, and I'm going to use formatting to tell it what to put in its place. So I'm going to take out zip code here, and I'm going to take out country code, but I'm just going to replace that with GB, because it's always going to be GB in this case. GN, GB. And then the API key, again, I'm going to leave it as curly braces. And then what I'm going to put after the closing strings is I'm going to put dot format. And essentially, every time it comes across one of these braces, it's going to replace it with a value that I put in here. So the first thing I'm going to put in here is postcode. And the second argument is going to be my key, my API key, okay? So I am going to grab that, and it's going to be that variable there, okay? API key. And then what we want it to do is we want it to print that URL, just to test it works. This isn't going to be our real thing, this is just a bit of testing here. So I'm going to print API URL, alright? So should we test that and see if it works at the moment? So all I'm going to do is I'm going to call that function now. I'm going to put get weather, and I'm just going to hard code this in there. So I'm going to put in a postcode of TN23, and I'm going to do that percentage 20 to put the gap in there, 1NN, and I'm also going to put in my API key again. So I'm going to go back to this email, copy that code again, and paste that in there too. Oh, that didn't copy very well, did it? Copy and paste it in there. There we go. Okay, so I've got the get weather, and this is what I'm going to do. I can't run this as is at the moment because I've got this in here. You can see here, this is where it's going to start running. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to comment this out temporarily because I don't want the actual app to run at the moment. I just want this to run, just so I can check this is working. So if we were to run this now, you'll see it generates a URL for me, and if I click on that, you can see it gives me the information for that location, just like it did earlier when I ran it and put it in manually. And you'll see it's in fact put the exact same data in as I did, but it's automatically generated. So what we want to do now is go one step further. So we want it to take the information from our form here and put that in the variable here, to put it in that space. So we want whatever the user enters as their postcode to become this value of postcode. Okay, we don't want to hard code it in, we want to pass it on, and that's going to use something called requests, which we're going to have a look at in a minute. So now we have our URL and we're able to get this data, but obviously this is no good to us in this web link. We need to get this data inside of Python. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to use another library called requests. And essentially what that's going to do is it's going to go to a URL or a website, and it's going to scrape that data and convert it into Python code that we can use. Okay, so we're just going to go import requests, and what we're going to do is we're going to go straight back down to our function again, and essentially what we want it to do is we're going to create a new variable called requests, which we're just going to call it rec. And essentially what we want to do is we want to call our requests thing here, and we want to do a get. And what we want it to get is we want it to get whatever is stored in this web page. Okay, so that's all that data about the weather and the temperature and the latitude and longitude. We want it to get all of that information, which is going to be stored in this URL. So what we wanted to do now, so it's got that data, it's scraped it together, we want it to return it, or return that data to us, and we're going to do something called JSON. So JSON is basically a way of storing and transporting bits of data. Okay, so all we're going to do is, instead of our print code on there, we're going to do return rec.json. Okay, what we're going to do now, just to check that works, is we've still got our function here. We're just going to turn this into a print statement. Okay, so I'm going to put this on the end here and chuck that on there. So let's see what happens now when we run this. So what we would have done here is we've now got all of the data from that URL address, so all that weather data, and we're storing it now in this variable called rec. And all we're going to do is we're going to return that data, okay? And then we're just going to print that. So let's see what happens now when we run this. Looks like we have an error. Why do we have an error? It might be because I've not installed it as a framework. So again, this always happens when you're coding. So go to my settings, go to my interpreter, and I'm just going to search for requests. There it is. So it always helps if you have the package installed before you try to run it. But there's nothing like live coding and live debugging when you're going. Alright, let's try this again. Click on OK. There we go. That's looking a bit more sensible now. Okay, so if I run it now, there we go. So all of that data I entered from that postcode is now in there for me to use. So I've got all of those arrays, dictionaries, etc. that I can now start doing things with that information. And remember, the whole point we're going to get to next is that you'll be able to take the postcode that we enter into here and use that in here to start pulling that data back and displaying it to the user. And that's what we're going to have a look at next. Okay everyone, so now we've managed to generate a URL. Okay, so we've got some data, but we have to hard code that data in at the moment. What we want to get to a point that we can do is that when we run this app and we click on the link here, what we want it to do is we want it to take whatever value we enter in here. So when I enter my postcode in here, I want to get that value automatically passing through to my Python. And this is where we're going to start creating our second page, so our results page, and we're going to get this value from our form that we created earlier and get that information on the weather there. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a second one of these app routes. Okay, so once they've clicked on that submit button, we want it to go to another page, which I'm going to call the results page, and show that data. So I'm going to use the same @ symbol again, dot root. This time in my quotes I'm going to do /results. So I want it to go to the results page. Now the only way this is going to be slightly different is the content of that page. I want to be the results from that form. Okay, so from that form and the weather data we're going to declare later. So it's not going to be anything else. And I'll show you what we're going to do there. To get that there, I'm going to put methods equals, and then in here I'm going to do post. And you'll see in a minute how that links up from our form in here. Okay, so once this gets posted, we want to pick up that and bring it into our results. Okay, and then what I want to do here is here it says render, oh, can't type, render results, open and close the brackets, and then I'm going to do return, and then I'm going to click on results page. Okay, so all we need to do now is we're going to need to slightly tweak our form, okay, to get that to work. So let me show you what we're going to do next. What we're going to do is we're going to go over to our HTML code and we're going to locate our form. All right, so this is our form. We've got our text field here, and we have got our submit button here. So I want to get this information, okay? But first I need to tell the form to do an action. So at the moment when I click that button, nothing's happening, all right? So I need to give the form an action. So I'm going to use the action one here, and I'm going to click on equals, and I'm going to use 2 curly braces, and I'm going to use the URL for, which we used earlier in the lesson when I did the URL get, when I was trying to get different pages, okay? And the URL I want it for is this one here, render results, this function, okay? So render results, click on there. So for render results, and I'm going to close that bracket, and I'm going to close those curly braces. So you always open and close the same amount. And then the method is going to equal post, okay? So what that's going to do is that's basically going to say those results need to be passed on to this function here, render results, okay? So now we've done that, should we have a look, see what happens when we rerun this code? So I'm going to go back to the home page, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run it again. I'm going to open this up, and let's bring it across now. Keeps opening another page. There we go. So let's pop that postcode in again. And you'll see here we get this results page, but we don't get the URL. Why am I not getting the URL? I know where I went wrong here. So what we need to do now is we need to get rid of this. I haven't actually told it yet to get that information. So I'm going to create a new section on here. So underneath return, I'm going to add a new line in. So what I want to do is I want to get my postcode, and I want that to be equal to request.form, okay, and I want that to match the postcode I set up earlier. So I'll show you in a second where I'm going to. So I want the postcode to be equal to this name here. So see how we added the name here, postcode, that needs to match there. So I want a new variable called postcode to match this postcode. And then what I'm going to get it to return is that postcode So I'm going to include a bit of text to say this is the postcode. So postcode is here. And then I'm going to say I want the postcode to be whatever the value of that variable is. Okay, so I'm just going to go over that again just to make sense. So what I've done here is I've created a new variable called postcode. And that value is going to be the output of my form value postcode. So this is mapped to whatever anybody enters in that text box, okay? And then all I'm saying now is display the words postcode and the value of that variable. So if I was to enter X, it would enter X. If I was to enter Y, it would enter Y. So let's have a look, see what happens when we run that now, shall we? So I'm going to click on this to run it. I'm going to drag it into this screen again so you can see. Pop the postcode in again. And I've got an error. Right, so let's have a look, see what the error is. Okay, so I've got a name error here, and it's saying request is not defined. So what I've done here, as you can see, is I've forgotten to include that library. So essentially it's saying to me, I have no idea what request is. You've not told me what that's called before. And that's because in here, when I've done my imports here, I now need to add another one called request, which I appreciate sounds very similar to requests, but I want requests. There we go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to stop it and rerun it again. So now we fixed that error, let's try running this again, shall we? So I'm going to click on this link here, alright? And I'm going to drag this across and we're going to pop that postcode in again, one last time so you can see it here. So I've got my postcode here. And now you can see it is pulling back that postcode. So that is stored now from the form. So I've taken it directly from the form. So whatever I put in that form, it's going to pull across. So whatever I enter in this field will get pulled back. So if I put X in here, it's going to bring back X. If I put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's going to bring back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so it's storing that value and we can now use this value. So as you can probably guess, what we're going to do next is we're going to pass this value into our URL and bring back the weather data on this page. Okay, so this results page here is going to show us the weather. And you can see we're working it here because you've got the get here, which is where it's fetching it, and the post. So every time I enter one of those new values on here, it was posting those results. Post, 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 post. Yeah. And every time I change it, it would do the same again. So now what we're going to do is we're going to develop our code further to now use that information to bring us back the weather data. So what we've done now is we have now been able to get this URL and convert it into some data that we can do information with in Python. So all I need to do now is I need to get the data from the weather, so this bit here, and I want to start using these values in my Python code so we can get them back to the user at the end of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my function for the results. I've got here, and I'm just going to add a line between the postcode and the return. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a new variable called API key, which is going to match the one I've got down here. And all I'm going to do is set it to the value of my API key, which I've got down here. So I'm just going to copy and paste this. Now you could set up a configuration file to store this data, which is quite common in the workplace. But the reason I haven't done this is because it doesn't play too well when we do it, when we push it out to a live server. So it's something we might develop later on, but for now we're just going to hard code it in our program. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another variable called data, which is going to take on our get weather. So that's returning the data. Okay, so we're going to put that function in there, call that function, and we're going to pass along the postcode and the API key. So postcode and API key, like that. So when that runs now, that's going to get that data and store it. So we now need to pull various bits of this data out. Okay, so you can think of this now as an array or a database on there that we can use. In fact, I've got a section here called coord, a section here called weather, a section called base, a section called main, visibility, wind, clouds, etc. Okay, so what I want to do is I want the temperature, which is in this main section, and I want the feels like temperature, and I would also like the, let's go for the description. Yeah. So I've got the description, which is in the weather section. I've got the temperature and the feels like temperature in the main section. Okay, and I can choose any of these other things in here. I might also get the location as well, so the name. And in order to do that, all I need to do is create variables for each of these. So for the temperature, I'm going to create a variable called temp, and that's going to be equal to, what you need to do is you need to create variables for each one. So I'm going to do temperature for temperature, and that's going to be getting that from my data table, and I would like the main. So if we go back to here, we know that it is stored within main, and we know it is the temp field. So I'm going to do main, and then I'm going to do temp. So I want to do some formatting on this, okay, because I want it to bring it back to 2 decimal places, and I want it to store it as a float. So all I'm going to do here is the formatting, some string formatting, just like we did earlier in here when we formatted some of the strings. I can't remember where that was on here. There we go, the formatting here, okay? So all I'm going to do is in front of this temp, add the quotes in, and I'm going to do curly braces, and this is going to float it to 2 decimal places, okay? And then I'm going to put dot format, and I'm going to put this in quotes like that. And I need to get rid of that too. So all that's going to do is you can take the temperature, float it to 2 decimal places. Okay, and then the other thing I want on here is I want the feels like temperature. So I'm going to do a variable called feels like, and we're going to do the same again. So the same formatting. So this time the feels like temperature is going to come from, let's go check where this is from. It's from main again, and it's feels underscore like. So I'm going to go data, square brackets, main, and this time I want feels like. Oh. Yeah, and I'm going to do the same again. I'm going to format that to 2 decimal places. So I'm going to do quote, curly braces, 0.2f, close curly braces, and then dot format, and then pop those in quotes, which I seem to have already done that bit. Brilliant. And then the other thing I want in here is I would like the description. So that is in the weather section. So I'm going to put description equals, and that's going to be in data weather, and that is going to be a description like so. And then lastly I wanted the location, and you see here that's just in the root table, so that's just going to be in data, and it's just going to be name. So I'm going to put location equals data and name, like that. So I've got my 4 data types here. So obviously what I need to do now is that I need to get those to show up on a HTML page, okay? So like we did here. So I'm going to create a new HTML page in my template section. So on here, I'm going to click on new HTML file, and I'm going to call it results.html. Okay, so I'm going to add a title, and then I'm going to put weather. And all I'm going to do in this body section is just create 4 bits of text here, which is going to link to the values that we created, not in that, in here. Okay, so link to these variables. We want it to pull in there. So I'm going to say, as a header one, the temperature is, and we're going to use the Ginger 2 syntax here to build up our weather thing. So I'll show you, I'll put a link in the description to what that is, but this is how the syntax of Ginger works. So again, it uses these curly braces. Okay, so I'm going to do curly braces, and this is going to need to match what value we have in here. So temp. And then I'm going to do another H1. I'm going to say the location is curly bracket, and that is going to match our location. Ooh. Location, curly bracket. Push a little gap in there. And then I'm going to do a smaller one now and saying feels like temp is, and curly bracket, and then that again is going to be feels like curly bracket, and I'm also going to put the description in here too. The weather is, and then curly bracket, description, curly bracket. Okay, so we have in our Python here, we've created these variables here, and we have also set up the template on here. So we now need to use the render template like we did here, so that it knows to put those values onto this page in these gaps. Okay, so we need to link the 2 together. So we're going to get rid of this return postcode, because we don't need that anymore, because we're replacing the postcode now with actual weather values. This is when we were testing to show that it came back with the postcode. Earlier. So you remember when we put the postcode in and we clicked on run, and then what it did is it just brought back the postcode to us. So we don't need that anymore. So I'm going to go render template. There we go. And then I'm going to put in here results.html. But the only thing I need to add in here is I need to essentially link these pairs of variables together. So I need to link temp with temp. I need to link location to location on here, and then we'll just need to match them up essentially. And so how we're going to do that is very simply match them for what it is. So the first thing I've got on my results is temp, so I'm just going to do temp equals temp, and then I'm going to do location matches location, location equals location. I'm going to do description equals description, and you can see we're matching pairs of variables here. So description equals description, and then lastly I have got location. Oh, I've got location. Feels like, must be feels like equals feels like. So feels like equals feels like. So I have got an error somewhere here, and I haven't quite fathomed out where it is yet. So what's it not liking? So render results, perhaps I forgot a comma. Perhaps I did forget a comma. I did indeed forget a comma. Let's go. Put a comma in those gaps there. All right. That seems to have got rid of some of those errors. Let's see. So let's try and run it, shall we? See what happens. Usually always a comma in some sort. All right. So we've got this running. Let's open up the tab and see what happens. I'm going to pop in my postcode and let's see what happens. Okay, so we've got an error. So the great news is when this comes up with an error, we can always go back to the code and find out what is happening. Okay, so it's having an issue here with pulling up this table. So the main temp issue is here that I've forgotten, the old chestnut of putting quotes around things. So let's chuck these all in quotes, shall we? There we are. So main, a bit of a twix here. Main, feels like. I think you slowly start learning these things as you go. Debugging. Remember, if your code runs first time without any errors, it's generally you're either a genius or you've missed something somewhere. Right, let's pop this in quotes. All right, so we've added this in now. Let's try running it again. I'm going to open it up one more time, and let's see what we get this time. So TN231NN. Submit it. All right, so we're still getting an error. Let's have a look. So if we go back now, what's it not liking? So float object has no attribute to F on the temp one. So let's see what's happening there. Why does it not like that one? I know what I've done. Again, it's another syntax error here. Syntax error? Format error here. I've forgotten to put the colon in there. See what I mean? Always debugging, always going through. Right, let's try that one more time. Fingers crossed we get a work this time. So TN23, one double N. Let's submit that in there. Another error. Right, let's see what the issue is this time. So list indices must be integers or slices, not strings. Okay, so it seems to have pulled up an error with the description. So let's go back and have a look at the dictionary for this one. And it was the weather description in here. Here we go. Okay, so I think what the issue is that I was treating it as a dictionary, but actually it's a list. So that's quite an easy fix. We just need to tweak this here to add in a 0 for the indexing rather than what I was doing before. So hopefully now this will run, she says, hopefully. All right, let's keep our fingers crossed, shall we? Oh no, still an error. Okay, what's it not liking? Expected token at the end. So it's found an error with my results page. You need to do something. Expected token end of print statement. I forgot my underscore. So if you remember here, I've got an underscore here, but I just put it with a space in it. So let's try that again now. Let's try that one last time. Fingers crossed we picked it up now. Okay, here we go. Keep your fingers crossed, everyone. Right, pop that in. There we go. Fantastic. So the issue we've got at the moment is that our temperature is showing still in Kelvin. So we're going to probably want that to be in metric. So what we're going to do just very quickly is go back to our code. And I'm going to stop this for a second. I'm going to go back to the main bit of code here. And where we generate that URL, if I get rid of that, and then pop it here. Try that. See if that works. See if that works. All right. Might not work. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. Let's see. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So the only thing I'm missing now, obviously, is that it hasn't given me any metrics on this. I'm going to put degrees Celsius. You can copy and paste the symbol if you would like. I'm going to pop it as degrees Celsius. That's not how you spell Celsius. That feels like temperature is degrees Celsius. All right, let's try running it one last time. And hopefully now we have it working, she says. Brilliant. TN23, 1NN. Hello. Oh, it's thinking about it. Thinking about it. There we go. So now we've got the values in degrees Celsius. So there's a couple of things now that we're going to work on. So the first thing is going to be some styling. So we're going to do a video about style sheets in a bit. And also we're going to talk a little bit about how we then put it onto Python Anywhere. Another thing we can do is we can find another API file that can convert that postcode into a city. So instead of saying this, it will say Ashford. Which might be nicer for the user to see, but that's an extra on there. So have a go at creating this and see how you get on, and then once we've done that, we can come back and have a look at some of the CSS styling and how we can link style sheets in. Well done everyone, good job.